Kings, queens, and everyone in between, welcome back to Gears and Queers. I'm Jake.
And I'm Chris. And Phantom Break.
Welcome to the inside of Tesla Model 3. And today we are going to show you everything.
It's accelerating over a pedestrian crosswalk.
Yep. Today we're going to show you everything, including full self-driving and our full thoughts and opinions on the Tesla Model 3. So let's get right into it. Well, Christopher, here we are, finally inside a Tesla Model 3, which, as you could have guessed, has been loaned to us from one of our generous friends, who also has loaned us 3 other vehicles that we have also reviewed, so those will be linked. But we finally are in the now ubiquitous, always controversial, and maybe the way forward Tesla Model 3.
I have never been in a Tesla other than this one, and so we both basically went into this, a lot of preconceptions, no real-world experience. How do we feel about it?
Where do we start? This is Tesla's entry-level EV, and this particular one is a 2021 long-range model. So we have the dual motors, the big battery. It's not performance-oriented, and we've got about 380 horsepower.
I think 340 something, and then higher torque. Numbers will be on the screen because both of us can't look anything up.
This really is what has made Tesla what it is. I mean, obviously it had a reputation beforehand, but this is now as ubiquitous as an iPhone. First impressions.
First off, I was actually pleasantly surprised by the interior. And I think few other cars have I heard and read so much about and not experienced than any Tesla product, let alone a Model 3. So when I got into this car for the first time, I was expecting to just be like experiencing bargain basement interior materials, surfaces, design, everything. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think that a lot of the materials in this car are very nice. And maybe not the steering wheel. That might be my biggest issue, is the design of it.
It looks like a toy.
It does, but the buttons, like the
control
clicking,
pods are cool.
Those are both, they feel very nice. The rim of the steering wheel feels very nice. The surfaces on the doors, I think all of that is really nice. My biggest issue is probably with all of the like satin metal look surfaces are painted. Painted plastic, and I really don't like the tweeter location on the doors, the front doors. I think that looks really cheap, but
yeah,
I will say the sound system, we'll get to that later, but was very pleasantly surprised by that. How about you on the interior?
I was gonna say, I think that is one thing we kind of shared. I was ready to come into this to be like, okay, like I'm sure this is going to feel premium in like ride and experience. It's not going to feel premium on the interior. I'm not a fan of the design, never have been, never will be. It's way too minimalist for me, but the materials actually feel pretty upmarket. It's, again, it really just comes down to design, but everything you interact with is pretty nice. Like, you know, we've got like a bunch of soft touch plastic, like vegan leather, which is vinyl, just call it vinyl. This sort of veneer up top, right between like the actual dash, like the glove box and the air vents, is, whether it's a veneer or not, it's really nice, sort of like open porous. But again, you know, we've got a mix of nice materials and then of course cost cutting. This is the entry level car. I wish this veneer was carried through to the back, or just something that gives it anything else. This is the only, you said it was the only warm tone thing that sort of breaks up this entire interior. And without it, it would feel more drab than it already does. Overall, materials are pretty nice. And of course, we have to talk about the only feature in the interior, which is the massive landscape-oriented screen.
You know, I am not super anti the massive screen, except the speed and the turn signals being on that screen. I'm really wishing we had a heads-up display, or even like the Mach-E, a really tiny screen right in front of the driver. I think either of those would really make it that much easier. Everything else, like, I thought I'd get really annoyed by all the stuff that they moved to the touchscreen and got rid of the physical controls. Jacob and I have very old vehicles where everything is a physical control.
Right.
But I feel like we both were pretty, like, okay with everything.
I mean, it's easy for just to speak for ourselves. Like, we can get used to this stuff pretty easily. I could not say the same for, say, like, my parents.
Right, we're technologically literate people.
I honestly probably less so than the average person, and it's not that bad. But when you really need to go digging for something, to like have to change the steering wheel position, it just takes some digging. It obviously takes your eyes off the road, which is a bit of a safety issue. And yeah, I think we both agree that any, like, even a small little LCD screen in that sort of in the air vents, or a heads-up display for like turn signals and speed, and even just that basic information would completely change my opinion of like how you interact with this
Right.
car on a daily basis.
But aside from that, I think these seats are really comfortable.
Yes.
They don't look... I always thought they looked pretty cheap, I will say that.
Yeah.
But they're very comfortable to sit in. We've got heated seats everywhere, even the middle one in the back, which I think is a cool touch. I know, like, EVs, it's like you get heated surfaces. We do have a heated steering wheel.
Because it's like more efficient than like the heat
than
running.
just warming up the cabin.
Right.
But yeah, no, like the seats are really comfortable. I could see this being a nice highway cruiser.
Yeah.
Bumpier pavement around town, not this car's forte.
Let's get into that. Okay, so we both had very similar like opinions on the interior coming in, and we're like pleasantly surprised for the most part in terms of materials. The other thing that I was sort of like on the opposite side from you is I was like, I know this car is gonna drive well in terms of like performance and handling and things like that, which it does. But this ride, and this is not the performance-oriented model, is too firm.
It is, and it's on
It's loud,
Primacy. I thought they were sport Michelin tires, but they're
Yeah.
not. They're on Primacy MXM4. It's not the biggest tire sidewall, I'll give it that, but even with this double laminated front glass, which I think we figured out was newer for 2021, and this is a 2022, it's got some noticeable road and wind noise. It can be borderline nauseating over Atlanta's notoriously poorly kept roads.
Yeah.
Conversely, you mentioned how we were both kind of like, we had differing opinions on how we thought the car would drive. This is a really nice car to drive, in my opinion. It is not a really nice car to be driven by.
Yeah.
More on that later. But the steering is, I think you said that like many people.
There's a bunch of people who said it's like a bunch of journalists were like that this is like the best electric steering. I mean, I wish we had the opportunity to throw it around more because that might be true, but at low speeds, it's very electric and more so, I think, than the average car. But
I happen to, I mean, of course,
The
those are
weighting
like
is nice.
those are big asterisks.
Yeah.
But I think that it's a really engaging car to drive. Obviously, the power aspect is there.
Yeah.
The steering is nice. It reminds me size and nimbleness wise of my G35, which I consider to be high praise because I really like driving that car.
it feels like a good size.
It does.
But yeah, you know, of course you can change the steering weighting to like, you know, comfort, standard, and sport. I am impressed with the handling. The ride itself, I was really surprised by, in my opinion. And I'm like not so, I don't mind a firm ride. I think this is just like, it just feels busy.
Yeah, you came from an RSX Type S. I think you would know.
Yeah. I'm no stranger to spine punishing ride comfort. We are the last people to enter into the conversation around the Model 3, like the, you know, the controversy and all that of just like build quality, which, I mean, let's just go ahead and touch on it. It does exist. There are some pretty horrific inconsistencies within panel gaps and fittings and just weird little anomalies that we picked up, and we haven't had this car except for a couple days.
Yeah, and this car is a 2022.
Yeah.
It has like 2,300 miles.
This is a late production car. We've talked at length about this. Things happen to cars. I'm not saying that Tesla is the only one. Absolutely not. Maybe it's unfair. Like, yes, Tesla comes under a lens of intense scrutiny, but like, I think it needs to be.
It really does. I mean, here's the thing, and I still will stand by this, and maybe I'll get canceled for this opinion, but if you can separate this car from Elon Musk, I think it's a great car.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, looking at the rear tailgate and all that, there's a piece of weather stripping. I don't know if those are cut by hand or by machine.
It looks like it was cut by
It
hand.
looks like it was cut by hand. The driver's side is cut way further in than the passenger side, and you can peer right into the trunk line and see, like, you know, the power lift gate, like actuator and all that, which, like, it's not that big of a deal. Like, it all still drains down like around the trunk line as it usually would, but like, it is very noticeable. The tray for the frunk, you can see clear into like the unibody of the car on one side, and it's tight as a drum on the other. The headlights, you can practically stick a finger up underneath the passenger side one as it pokes out from the bumper, not so on the driver's side. I mean, this car was like $51,000 at the door. Like, of course, there are, you know, quality control issues in other cars, but like, they do exist, and they still exist even in a late production Model 3, and I do think it's a bit inexcusable at this point. I just do.
Here's what I think about the quality control issues. This is pretty much a brand new car. We know the owner. It has never been in an accident. You might not notice unless you were looking for those types of things.
Right.
And yes, there is like so much talk and hype about Teslas and the insufferable stands out there that just
It's a whole other conversation.
It is, and we're not talking about that right now. But I don't think most of those issues that we found the average person would even care about.
No.
I do like that when the light turns green, it bongs at you.
It is very nice.
Anyway, we're also talking about an American car, and I feel like not a lot of people are willing to think about this in that terms. It gets compared to European cars super often, which,
Right.
you know, of course, like this is squarely aimed at like a C-Class, a 3 Series, an A4 pricing, and pretty much every dimension.
Yeah.
A lot of other American car companies don't have the best fit and finish, but at the same time, you don't hear stories about them getting built in tents. So,
Valid point.
I think that that's a valid criticism.
Yeah.
I would hope that the build quality continues to improve because it appears like it has. But at the same time, this very car has had both of its side cameras replaced already under warranty because they had condensation in them. So,
do with that information what you will. Okay, let's go ahead and cover it. We've kind of been toying with full self-driving. It is arguably the biggest sort of attracting feature of this car.
do I have opinions on that? Yes. And here is my opinion. I would buy a Tesla Model 3. I would not ever go anywhere near the autopilot full self-driving.
Yeah.
First of all, it is recently increased in price to $12,000 if you buy it outright, which is, a fifth of the car's price added onto it. And my quote about the Tesla Model 3, lovely car to drive, not to be driven by.
Yeah.
When I first picked this car up from other Chris who owns it, I took it onto the highway and there was some traffic. So I was like, perfect, let's try out the autopilot stop and go. This is where this should shine. It was nauseating.
Yeah.
The stop and go, and you experienced it because we did the same thing.
Yeah.
The stop and go was just so abrupt. To me, it felt like being in the car with someone who had never driven before.
Mm-hmm.
The inputs, the steering, everything was just so jerky. And then we did it on the highway, and there were some really questionable things that the car did not pick up. It is just so not there yet.
Yeah, and especially when we were just doing our intro, low speed, the car's just slamming on the brakes, picking up,
We're going 30 miles an hour in a very recently redone road with very clear markings, and there were so many phantom brake moments.
Yeah.
I could not imagine trusting this car.
It's just very telling to pull up that menu of, features, and everything beside it in parentheses says beta.
And
I
I think it still needs to be treated as such.
Absolutely.
We are not the first person, we will not be the last person to say there is no full self-driving car available on the market today. And this is absolutely not one.
Which I guess just brings us to really the only thing that matters is, would we buy one?
I would, and I'll tell you why. I think the performance of the car is great.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really engaging to drive. And one thing we can't ignore about Tesla is they got that supercharging network.
True.
They've got the best network of chargers, and it just is a fact. We cannot ignore that. Would you buy a Model 3 or any Tesla?
I wasn't really sure what I was thinking coming into it, and I think the way that some of my immediate opinions were flipped, I don't think I would. I just think it's just the style for me, honestly. I find this interior really drab and dismal to be in, and I don't think it having the white leather would help that. And then you have a choice of 6 colors. It's all very Ford Model T. I don't know. It doesn't give me any personality, and aside from matting it from a stop, which is endlessly fun. Well, I won't say endlessly. It actually gets old after about 10 times. But other than that, there's not much to it. Yeah, it drives great. It's just lacking on any personality for me. And I honestly think that is really the only reason that I would not buy one. It's interesting being late to this conversation and being able to approach it with a little more information and a little less rose tinted glasses.
Absolutely.
To be able to be okay, is this a great daily driver? Sure. If you're in the market for it, by all means, don't buy it for the full self-driving. And yeah, I think you'll get along famously.
All I will say, and to round out our conversation, is that I came out of this experience driving the Model 3 around thinking better of it than before, and I think that is high praise.
Interesting. I feel like I'm on the opposite spectrum, but that's fine. That's why we do this.
And that's why there's 2 of us.
And on that note, keep an eye out for our next video. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Stay tuned.
Bye.
Bye.